All right, welcome back to the Flipping Junkie podcast. Today I've got Colin Spivey on. This guy's a rock star. Welcome to the show, Colin.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. So I'm going to read Colin's bio, and then we're going to get into finding out about his journey into real estate and what he's done in the last 3 years, because he's been investing for about 3 years and has experience with wholesaling, flipping, raw land, and land development. And his company, GGI Home Buyers, has transitioned this year to primarily focusing on wholesaling, which is smart with the way everything's gone. GGI Home Buyers has also transitioned their marketing from mass cold calling and text blasting to very focused niche outbound prospecting and pay-per-click ads. So we'll be talking about that. And GGI Home Buyers has a total revenue goal of $500,000 this year, which is incredible. Congratulations, Colin.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I've had a chance to talk with Colin's fiance as well, because she's been working on the team part-time, just helping us out with Forefront CRM. So it's been really cool. The other day we had an all hands meeting where everybody in Forefront, we get on a call just to talk to each other, being that everybody's been remote for so long. And I found out that Colin, that you and your fiance were not even 21 yet. And I was like, wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
So it means even that much more that you've done what you've done in the short amount of time that you've done it, and being at the age and the things that I'm sure that you've dealt with, being at your age, trying to buy houses and actually succeeding. She said that you didn't even have anybody in your family or anything that's done this. It's like you're the only person that you knew getting into this to do this, right?
Yeah. My parents didn't love the idea of it. My mom told me it was a Ponzi scheme, but no, I didn't have anybody. I think I had like a great aunt that was a real estate agent or something like that, but no, I didn't have anybody in the investing space or anything like that.
And so how did you get into it? What sparked your interest in this industry?
Yeah, like most people, rich dad, poor dad. Starting off in high school, pretty much probably my sophomore year, I really started kind of getting into day trading type stuff. With the day trading, you have to be 18 to really trade with real money and all that. So I did a lot of paper trading with kind of fake money, and I learned a lot. It was quite a bit of a waste of time. I mean, I would be in class, like sitting there with 2 monitors, day trading and stuff. And it was just with fake money. Like it was just for fun for a while. Once I turned 18, I believe senior year, I don't know, maybe junior. No, I think it would be senior year. But once I turned 18, actually junior year, I had my dad co-sign so that I could actually trade with real money. And so I invested like a couple $100s and started day trading and messed around with it for a while. Junior year, I also started kind of an eBay business where I went and bought clothes from Goodwill and took pictures and resold them on eBay and everything. I also did a lot of kind of handyman work, landscaping work through high school and everything. And so through all that, I was able to save up about $20,000 throughout high school. I was super frugal, didn't like to spend money. Kimberly, my fiance, always tells a story about, I don't remember it, but apparently on one of our first dates, she was ordering and said, "And I'll have a sweet tea." And I said, "No, she'll have a water." So if that tells you anything about how frugal I was, like I did not like to eat out. I did not like to spend money really at all. So I saved about $20,000 through high school, through all that other stuff. I believe it was towards the end of junior year that I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And once I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it kind of made me start thinking a lot more into real estate, rather than trading stocks and little eBay business, side hustle type thing. And so I slowly kind of transitioned out of that, started really diving into real estate, and was planning on getting my license and become an agent. I wanted to buy rentals, and that was kind of my plan at that point. Started getting big into kind of the bigger pocket stuff. everything like that. And then kind of into my senior year, once I had turned 18 and could actually legally sign a contract, I started really focusing on trying to find a property to burr. So buy, rehab, rent, repeat, or whatever it ends up being. But there's burr with a bunch of R's.
Yeah.
But so I secured private lending from my great grandfather. I had talked him into pulling some money out of the stock market and investing it with me to buy a property, rehab it, rent it out, and then refinance it and repeat. And so there was about 6-month period or so where I was looking at properties, making offers on properties. It was mainly on market type stuff. I didn't really know much about off market or anything like that. I was looking on the MLS. I'd be in class all day, scanning the MLS, waiting for something new to pop up. I'd be running numbers in class, using the bigger pockets calculators, trying to figure out what made sense. I'd be going and looking at properties after class or after school once I got out of school. And I made a couple of different offers. A lot of them got rejected, obviously, being on the MLS. I mean, this was 2019, early 2020, I guess. It was pre-COVID. It was towards the end of 2019, really, pre-COVID. So, I mean, the market wasn't as hot as it has been in 2021, 2022, but it's still super hot. So making offers on the MLS and everything like that, a lot of them got rejected. I did have 2 offers get accepted that I ended up pulling out of because one, after it got accepted, I had a 3-day inspection period or something on it. And so got an inspector out there. We went through everything and the foundation was basically crumbling under the house. And so I was like, yeah, I can't do this price on this one anymore. And then there was another one that something ended up falling through with the seller ended up deciding not to sell, and they had some contingency in there. It was something weird. I didn't understand it at that point. Something weird with the agent, and that's kind of why my offer got accepted, is because nobody else was really making offers on it. So both those kind of fell through. And then my great grandfather, I think, kind of started to get cold feet on it. He had a conversation with somebody and they're like, oh, you're going to give this 18-year-old $150,000, $200,000 or whatever it was at that point. And so he got kind of cold feet on it. So then kind of my private money dried up. I started looking into a whole bunch of different hard money places and stuff and talking to them. They were very skeptical about lending to an 18-year-old. They wanted my dad to co-sign on everything. And my dad was not a fan of that. He was like, I don't mind co-signing on something that you're day trading with $100, but I'm not co-signing on a 6-month rehab loan. So I couldn't really get funding. I probably could have dove into it deeper and found a hard money lender willing to work with me, but with what I know now. But at that point, I talked to 4 or 5 different hard money lenders and they were all saying no. So I kind of decided to transition more into wholesaling. That was over the summer, basically right after COVID hit, my senior year, going into my freshman year of college. I did not want to go to college. I wanted to do real estate, but my parents were very pushy about going to college. I graduated as valedictorian in high school, so I had kind of full rides quite a few places, so they really, really were pushy. So basically I ended up making the deal. I followed Kimberly, my girlfriend at the time, fiance now, to MTSU, and decided to go to college. In return I would go to college for at least a year if my dad co-signed a loan for me to house hack. So I bought a townhome about 15 minutes away from MTSU. and it was a 3-bed, 2.5 bath. I lived in one room and rented out the other 2 rooms to 2 roommates that were in college. And they paid my mortgage. They paid
Nice.
my mortgage entirety, and all I had to pay was a third of the utilities each month. So I started house hacking, was in school and trying to start a wholesaling business. Started getting into some more off-market type marketing at that point. I mean, the thing you usually hear when going into off-market marketing is, hey, send direct mail to absentee owners. So that's what I got into, started sending out some direct mail to absentee owners. I am by nature not an extrovert at all. I'm not a sales guy by nature. I'm much more of a introvert, want to be at a computer figuring something out, analytical type stuff. And so it's funny, on my first appointment, I got a phone call off one of my postcards and set up an appointment with this guy and drove over to the house. And this was, I mean, probably 4 or 5 months into COVID. So it was still kind of the, oh God, like what's going on here? We didn't really smash the curve or whatever it was that we were trying to do in the first month of COVID, and it's still going like crazy. What's going on? And so like, I remember pulling up and having to put on a mask, and the seller had on a mask, and I walked up, and it was a older house, fairly well kept, not in bad shape at all. The yard was pretty well taken care of and everything, and started talking to this older guy on his porch. Found out his wife had recently passed away. He was considering selling and downsizing, or pulling out some kind of reverse mortgage on the house. And I kind of got nervous at that point, and basically like told him like, hey, you've got a super nice house here. You probably don't need to sell to an investor. I don't think you should do a reverse mortgage either. Here's why. I kind of knew about reverse mortgages. And I was like, if you're going to sell, you need to probably list with a real estate agent. So I didn't even like, we still now, like if we think for somebody to list with the agent's better than selling to an investor, we still tell them that now. But I didn't even get into figuring out like, oh, your wife passed away, and going more into motivation and figuring out, okay, well, does he actually need to sell to an investor or not? Because most of the time it's very surface level on that first couple minutes of the appointment. So I was there maybe 10 minutes talking to this guy, and didn't even make it inside the house. We were on the front porch the whole time.
Wow.
So like was not what you're supposed to do whatsoever. And so from there, I had sent out, I think, like direct mail for like 2 months or something like that. Direct mail is expensive. It started eating into my money quite a bit. I went with an FHA loan on our townhouse and everything. So I had money invested into the townhouse, and then was also trying to start this business while also trying to live off those savings while in college. So started eating up a lot of money with direct mail. And so I was like, oh God, like I can't keep spending all this money. So then I decided to get into cold calling. I think I had like bought a course or something on cold calling, and started getting into cold calling, and decided like, hey, I'm not going to hire it out or anything. I'm going to cold call myself, figure out how to do it, and then I'll hire it out, which looking back was an absolute terrible decision, because even more so being uncomfortable talking in person sometimes as more of an introvert, I hate being on the phone. I don't know what it is about being on the phone, but I hate even having to like call and order takeout, or like call customer support on something.
That delayed me getting into real estate investing for about 3 years, because my introduction to it was this box of tapes, and I forget, like VHS tapes, like that you put in a VCR, and it was from, I think it was Carlton Sheets or somebody. I don't know if you're so young. I don't
I've heard of them.
You see it on eBay or something, but that guy was all about cold calling, and he'd call people up and then work all these different strategies. He's like, if they don't fall into this, you could do this and you could do this creative thing and all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't have anything to do with any of this.
Yeah.
And anyway, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So it was a terrible idea. I hated cold calling. I hate calling a warm call. Like I hate having to call a lead or anything. Like I just hate being on the phone in general. So I don't know why I thought cold calling was going to be a good strategy for me. But really for the next probably 3 months, maybe a little bit longer than that, I was cold calling on and off. I mean, it would almost like make me sick to my stomach before I picked up the call, or picked up the dialer to start making calls. And so I cold called on and off, got a couple leads, everything like that. Nothing really came from it. Right around the time that I made the transition from direct mail to cold calling, maybe right after that, I attended Flip Hacking Live. It was their virtual event that year, and so I was able to attend. And it was like over my birthday and everything. My parents were like, "Hey, like let's go out to eat for your birthday." I was like, "No, I'm on this event. I can't do anything today." And watched the event, learned a lot there, and ended up joining their runway group, which wasn't a super smart choice because I was already running short on money and their group is fairly expensive. I'm not sure what it is now, but I think at that time it was like $15,000 or something a year. And it was like $1,500 a month if you wanted to pay on a payment plan. And so got on the payment plan and then was like, well, I can make my first deal in the next 3 months or so with all their training and stuff. And started getting into everything, and I was still just cold calling. That was my only marketing. And so, I mean, my goal was to cold call for an hour every day. It was more like I might get 1 or 2 days in a week that I actually cold called for an hour a day. So I wasn't doing kind of the work I needed to be doing. So things just weren't happening. So money started getting really tight, and I was like, oh God, like this is getting bad. Like I'm gonna have to start putting some stuff on a credit card or something, because like I'm in over my head at this point. So from there, I was approached, I guess at the end of January of 2021. I was actually at the runway event in Nashville in January, and a guy I had met at a local RIA texted me and asked if I wanted to grab lunch and talk some things over about business. And so I was like, yeah, sure. He'd been flipping for 2 or 3 years at that point, I believe. The year before, like in 2020, I think he did a couple flips, like I don't remember exactly. I think it was like 5 or 6 flips. So he had a lot more going on than I did. So like the following Monday, I went and had lunch with him and his wife. They're like, hey, we're trying to grow. We don't want to take on like extra overhead of employees and everything. We'd really like you to kind of come into business with us and kind of handle some of the sales stuff and everything like that. So for me, I basically told him like, hey, I don't ever want to actually work for somebody. Like I've worked for somebody before. I'd much rather work for myself. But I'll come into the business with kind of the understanding that, hey, we'll work together for a year. And then at the end of the year, we're either going to decide, hey, we want to go into a legitimate partnership here, or we are just going to branch back off and I'll go back on my own. So we agreed upon that. I went basically 1099 into their business, and my title was acquisitions rep. So I went in kind of as acquisitions. I mentioned earlier, I'm not a sales guy, but I went in as acquisitions, and pretty much was kind of doing the same thing that I had already been doing. I was making cold calls. I had a little bit more accountability of saying like, hey, well, at the end of the week, I have to go to my boss / partner and basically tell him like, hey, made this many calls, or I got this many leads, or whatever it may be. So I had a little bit more accountability there, but I still wasn't getting done the entirety of what I needed to get done to really produce results. Because even at that point, I mean, cold calling was super saturated. Everybody was getting cold calls and stuff like that. So we were probably about 30 days in, and basically he sat me down and was like, hey, you're not getting done what you need to get done. You have another 30 days. If we don't have any like more progress, anything under contract or anything like that, we're going to have to part ways. And so at this point, I'm like, oh God, like I'm hurting for money. I'm working what I think is enough to do like get deals. And now I'm like basically on the verge of being fired. So I kicked it into the next year and really started hammering. Convinced him to let me start text blasting as well. Those were the days where you could send out a whole bunch of texts. I mean, I was sending out like 3,000 texts a day or something to these lists and handling all the responses, still trying to make cold calls. And so from text blasting, we ended up getting a property under contract and everything like that. And it was like a week and a half later. So like I really kicked it into extra gear. But we got a property under contract. So I kind of saved my position there. And then from there, throughout the next couple months, we ended up bringing on a cold caller to cold call full time. I kind of managed her and trained her and everything. Ran all of our text blasting. I started creating a lot more. I started building out marketing sources basically. So I convinced him, hey, we need to hire a cold caller, have her do it full time. I'll manage all of our leads. I was running all of our acquisitions, going on appointments, everything like that. I was running all of our text blasting, sending out 3,000 texts a day, responding to everybody, handling phone calls from leads and everything like that. And slowly kind of transitioned into handling a lot of our day-to-day operations. I kind of managed everything. I ran all of our acquisitions, managed all of our leads and everything like that, and managed all of our dispositions. We wholesaled some, we flipped some, and we started wholesaling towards the end of the year. We started wholesaling more to big eye buyers and stuff that were buying in the area. And so he kind of transitioned more into raising capital. We needed more capital. We started doing quite a few deals. So he started raising capital and he was managing all of our rehabs. So things were going pretty well for a while. And kind of, I think it was basically February through the end of October that we were working together. I think we did right at 20 deals, maybe a little bit over, a total of like 850,000 in revenue. So we did really well together. But we went back to Flip Hacking Live in October, and we kind of started having that discussion of, hey, at the beginning of the year, we said we're going to either go into a partnership or we're going to part ways again, and trying to figure out what we wanted to do here. We ultimately decided we kind of had different long-term visions. We think we have a little bit different core values. We didn't think it was going to be the greatest partnership. We had made it work and it was working, but long-term, we just kind of decided, hey, we can work together on deals in the future, but we don't think it's best to work together in the business as legal business partners. So we basically decided that at Flip Hacking Live. After Flip Hacking Live, there was kind of like a 2-week period where I kind of showed him the ropes on, hey, here's how I've been running these operations, everything, kind of transitioned everything out, transitioned myself out of the business, kind of beginning mid-November. I took a little bit of a break of just kind of like chilling out because I was super burnt out at that point and everything. And kind of, I guess, end of November, beginning of December, I really started back up and GGI Homebuyers was born. So not the best time to really be starting with being in December. That's like the slowest month of the year, but started back in December. and started trying to build everything back up. Started using a couple different CRMs while I'd been working with my former boss partner. We had gone through a couple of different CRMs. I think we had used RE Simply. We had used another one I don't remember the name of, and then I'd heard about Forefront. So we started using Forefront. I really liked the interface and the follow-up sequences, and everything like that with Forefront. And so when we split off, I was like, well, I'll try a couple of different CRMs first and see what else is out there. And tried out 2 or 3 different CRMs over the next 2 or 3 months, and then found myself back to using Forefront because couldn't get anything else to work the way I wanted it to. So we still use Forefront now, but we slowly built it back up this year. We've done 2 deals this month so far.
Nice.
And I'm trying to hire for acquisitions right now. I've got her technical title is junior acquisitions. Basically, at the beginning of the year, I started trying to hire for acquisitions because I knew that was kind of my weak link, my weak spot. Made a couple of different hires this year. None of them have worked out great, whether it's a core value misfit or whether it's they're not a super good salesperson or whatever it ended up being. They just didn't work out. So I decided to kind of try out a junior senior acquisitions dynamic where I'm kind of the senior acquisitions. I run appointments and everything. Junior acquisitions come in, earn their stripes through prospecting and different stuff like that, and are being trained on how to run senior acquisition appointments. And then they get promoted into that senior acquisitions, which would be kind of a normal acquisitions rep.
Cool.
And so I went ahead and made 3 hires all at once for junior acquisitions. 2 of them have kind of weeded themselves out with not having time available. One thing I still don't understand is you can tell somebody, hey, this is a full-time job. You're going to be working 40 hours a week. But all they hear is flexible schedule and think they only have to work 10 or 15 hours a week. But so the other 2 kind of weeded themselves out and are my current kind of junior acquisition. She's still with us. She's great. But I think she will be better suited more in the dispositions side of things. So I'm slowly kind of transitioning her to run more of our dispositions type stuff, and trying to start rehiring for acquisitions. So I think that's kind of a long summary of my journey.
No, it's good. Yeah. It's
but
interesting how much you had to overcome to get to where you are. And I think that's the part that's missing from most people's explanations of, getting into the business. And so I really, appreciate you're getting into like, the private money being there and all of a sudden it wasn't, and then it's like all these different points where you could have given up and said, I can't do this because I don't have what these other people had when they got started. I'm the victim, here's the reason why, and then feel okay with just giving up on it. And you wanted it bad enough. And then, you're talking about how you, at that point, had to kick it into high gear. And it's like, yeah, that's what it takes. And I think that is one of the hardest parts for, at least it was for me. And I know a lot of other real estate investors, that whole, when you have to hold yourself accountable, that can be sometimes the most difficult thing to do, because you can slip into these patterns of, just doing work that you enjoy. But then at the end of the day, what are you doing? I mean, you're not operating the business in the way that it should be operated. So I applaud you at such a young age, doing all of that, setting things up, making some mistakes, and finding out what you like and don't like. And then, especially getting into hiring, and I'd imagine some of the group, that you joined, helping with seeing the benefit of that and helping you to be able to do that, because that's definitely something I wish I'd done much sooner, as well as direct to seller marketing. Something I waited a little bit too long to do too, which, I'd never go back to, I mean, there's some ways to do MLS, but
Yeah.
if you want to do volume, that's pretty tricky.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, really, really great stuff. I did want to talk a little bit because yeah, I remember whenever you joined as, for your own company there on, for Forefront, because I think I handled the onboarding call.
Yes,
Nate,
you did.
I don't think it was Nate. I think it was me, but, yeah, I was interested because you had checked out the other systems. What was it that made you say, you know what, I'm gonna stick with Forefront. I'm gonna use Forefront. What was the thing that led you to that?
Yeah. So I guess the biggest factor was just simplicity. Very straightforward to use. I'm trying to remember what the other one was. There's one, I can't remember the name of it, but came highly recommended. A lot of people use it, a lot of people like it. It just was a little bit complicated, I guess. I kind of figured out how to use it and everything, but everything was kind of 2 or 3 clicks deep. Like if you wanted to get something, you had to like click here, then click here, and then you have it, or click here, click here, click here, you have it type thing. And so it just did not, the functionality of it, the simplicity of it, it just did not work for what I was looking for, I guess. I use REI Sift to manage a lot of my data and everything like that. And they they promote kind of hey, you can use it as a CRM as well. So I kind of transitioned to trying to use them as a CRM. I did not, I guess, understand how to use it as a CRM. I kind of figured out how to use it for data management, but I didn't really get how to use it for CRM. So I kind of try to put together like how I thought I was supposed to use it for CRM. And it just did not work very well. It was a transitionary time where I just let go of another acquisitions and brought in a new acquisitions, and he was managing our leads and trying to do it in REI Sift, and he was a little bit technically challenged and wasn't great with technology, and so that made things even more difficult. And then he only had an iPad, he didn't have a laptop, so what was on my screen was different formatting on his screen, and so there was lots of different kind of complications with that. And so finally, I just was like, okay, I'm just going to move back to what I know works and just go back to Forefront. And then came back to Forefront and haven't regretted it since. So mainly the simplicity and functionality of it. Everything's kind of one or 2 clicks away of where you need to get. And then the follow-up sequences, I really like. How easy it is to kind of build out the automations and the automated follow-up sequences and everything like that in Forefront. Because I mean, you can do automations with other stuff, but most of them you have to do it through Zapier and figuring out like, okay, well now I got to integrate with Twilio to have this automatic text send and everything like that. So mainly just the simplicity of it overall. Somebody that's not super technically versed can figure it out pretty easily and build out automations and everything like that they need to fairly easily. So
nice. How are you consistent in using the follow-up? I mean, do you guys have it built into your process where if offer's not accepted or what, it's automatically going into this sequence or this other sequence?
Yeah. So Kimberly, my fiance, she kind of does all of our lead management, lead intake type stuff. So we keep everything as manual follow-up unless it falls into these buckets. So we have a cold lead follow-up sequence, which is just, hey, basically, or let me start. We have freezing cold lead, which is basically, hey, I don't want to sell for 12 plus months. We can get into kind of where those leads were coming from with the mass marketing, kind of why I made that transition here in a minute. But with mass cold calling, mass text blasting, we were getting a lot of freezing cold and cold leads that were like, hey, I don't want to sell for the next year, but I probably want to sell next year. Or, hey, I don't want to sell for the next 6 months. So we had freezing cold, drip campaign follow-up sequence, basically, that was just like, I think I set it up for like a 2-year sequence of like, they just get a text like once every month and a half or something, or maybe every 2 or 3 months, or I don't remember how I set it up. But they got a text every so
That's
often
so
for
cool.
like 2 years.
It's pretty cool
And
that you have all that happening and you don't even have to remember the exact details. It's just the process is set up and now it just runs.
Exactly. So we had the freezing cold follow up over 2 years. And so if we had a lead come through, she talked to him and it was like, yeah, it's freezing cold. We just drop it in the freezing cold sequence and it just hits them until either they fall off and come back into, hey, analysis needed, where we basically say, hey, they're dead, or we're going to contact them manually again, or until they answer one of our texts or emails or whatever it ended up being and said, hey, yeah, I think I'm ready to sell, or whatever happened. Then we kind of had the same thing set up for cold leads. So somebody that doesn't want to sell for at least 6 months. So it's less than 12 months, but at least they don't want to sell for at least 6 months, because that's very common. You talk to somebody, hey, a cold lead, I don't want to sell for the next 6 months. So I think it's like a year-long follow-up for cold leads. And I think it's like a monthly text. So basically it just messaged them once a month, it's just like, hey, just wanted to make sure we stay top of mind. I'm sure you're not ready to sell yet, type stuff. And then we kind of had a warm lead ghost sequence. So any kind of warm or hot lead we keep in manual follow-up, and Kimberly manually follows up with them, just because those are our kind of most prized possession. Those warm, hot leads, we want to make sure we're making sense completely with everything that we're saying, because usually those people are responsive, whereas the cold leads, freezing cold leads, more than half the time, they don't respond to your text or email or phone call. So we basically had freezing cold and cold set up, and then warm and hot were kept in manual follow-up for Kimberly to follow up with. And then we ran into kind of, hey, well, some of these warm and hot leads ghost us. They stop replying. We can't figure out why they stopped replying. And we're having to follow up with them like once a day, or if it's a hot lead, if it's super hot lead, we might be following up with them twice a day for a week or whatever it ended up being. So then I was like, well, let's build out a follow-up sequence for warm and hot leads that have ghosted us. So we have a warm lead ghost and a hot lead ghost sequence set up now too. And basically with warm lead ghost, I think it's like one tech, or I think it's like 3 or 4 texts a week for a month, and then it automatically drops them into the cold drip campaign. So basically, like the cold drip starts off with, hey, I'm sure you're not interested in selling right now, blah, 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 blah. And so it automatically puts them in there after like a month, but they get 3 or 4 texts and a couple phone calls for a month, basically. And if they've ghosted us for over a month, then it's basically they get moved into cold leads.
So you chain them together, you use the one, and then whenever that one ends, it automatically starts them into the colder one. Okay, cool.
And so we've actually changed them all together now. So it goes, if they start as a hot lead and they ghost us, it'll go into a hot lead ghost sequence, which is like 2 texts a day plus a phone call for a week. So like 3 contacts a day for a week. And then it goes into like 1 text a day and a couple more phone calls for the next 3 weeks. So it's like a full month of just hammering them. We have not had anybody that has ghosted us that we've put into a hot lead continue to ghost us. We've gotten in contact with all of them at some point. So most of them were around that like 20-day mark, when it's like, okay, these people are not giving up. And so I know manual follow-up.
These people are not giving up.
Yeah. Manual follow-up, you'd have to be a special person to have the wherewithal to really follow up with these people every single day, multiple times a day for 20 days. But so if somebody starts as a hot lead, they ghost us, and they don't respond to us, the entire drip sequence, follow-up sequence, that whole hot lead ghosted sequence, then they automatically funnel into the warm lead sequence. So then it's like 2 or 3, I think it's 3 or 4 texts every week for a month and a couple of phone calls. And so if they went through that and still didn't talk to us, then they're getting moved into the cold lead follow-up sequence, which is in a year long. And so then they're getting hit for a year. And then if they still don't talk to us, or if they talk to us and we just drop them right back into it, then they funnel into the freezing cold. So it's basically like in total, I think it's like 3 years and 2 months of
awesome.
hitting somebody if they
Yeah.
started as a hot lead and funnel all the way through.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how we have it set up.
How many leads like a rough estimate per month are you starting, lately to be putting into the system?
Yeah. So I guess that's a kind of good segue into kind of talking about why we changed our marketing and how that's affected us now. So last year with my previous partner / boss, we were doing a lot of the bulk cold calling, being on a dialer, cold calling, and then mass text blasting. That's kind of where all of our leads, all of our deals came from. Towards the end of the year, that kind of started to dry up, and kind of into this year, it's kind of dried up even more. I think we did it basically all the way through until the beginning of this month or the end of last month. So almost a full 6 months this year. And we only pulled like one deal off of text blasting. And then like, I think we had a contract on one off of cold calling, but it fell through. That was a whole crazy story about a seller being impersonated by somebody overseas. But yeah, I can get into that for just a second. But basically, we got a hold of this guy. He was an older guy, was by himself and everything. We went and met with him in person, made him offer, went back and forth, negotiated over like 2 days, and then finally got the property under contract. Filed a affidavit memorandum, or I think a lot of people call it NOI, on the property and everything. Our contract was contingent upon him being able to buy a new house. I had Kimberly get licensed at the beginning of this year, so we could convert some of those retail type stuff. So she was working with him to find a new house. Everything was going smoothly for like a month. He had been making some offers and everything. He was a little bit difficult. He was probably in his 70s or 80s. He didn't use the internet. He only had a landline, didn't have a GPS. Kimberly had to go pick him up for all his showings and stuff. So it made things a little bit difficult, but we were working with this guy, and then all of a sudden, about a month and a half in, this 1 week, I started getting all these phone calls about my affidavit memorandum of, hey, we have this property under contract too. I saw you had a memorandum filed. Why do you have a memorandum filed? And like, it was like a couple different investors kept calling me about it. Long story short, we couldn't figure out what was going on for like a week. The following week, I finally figured it out. One of the investors that also had a contract on it, basically was like, hey, I've got the seller on the phone. I want to tie you into the call because he's not making sense. And so he had already told me he thought the seller had multiple personality disorder or something. I was like, I've spent a lot of time with this seller. I don't think he does. So I got tied in the phone call and immediately could tell it was not the actual seller. And so basically this guy from overseas had called the seller like at the beginning of February or something, and told him he won the lottery, got all of his information, and had scammed him for almost like $500,000 between retirement, savings, and credit cards. And so I ended up talking to the seller's daughter and got all this information from her. But so then he kind of had wiped out the seller on this side of things. So the last thing left was the house. So he was like, okay, well, I'm just going to try to sell the house now. And hopefully house sells, money comes to the bank account, and I can take that money too. So he started filling out everybody's PPC ads, trying to get people to get contracts. And so then he would call and talk with the investor, impersonate the seller, and sign contracts via email to sell the house. So there ended up being like detectives and attorneys, and everybody got involved, and it
Oh,
ended
wow.
up being this whole big ordeal. So we just dropped our contract on it. But it was kind of crazy. But I think that was the only contract we got off like the mass cold calling. So we were getting quite a few leads with the text blasting and mass cold calling and everything, but they were all cold and freezing cold leads or retail leads. They weren't good leads. And so we were doing like 5 to 10 leads a week while we were doing the mass stuff. And so, it was like 20 to 40 leads a month, probably through the mass text blasting, mass cold calling stuff. And so from there, we have kind of transitioned into doing very focused outbound marketing. So we kind of try to focus more on motivation and niche down on our outbound marketing. And then we go through a sequence of cold calls and texts and everything like that, whether it's foreclosures, tax delinquents, probates, stuff like that, where it's pretty high motivation. There's a pretty good chance of them selling or selling to an investor.
What tool are you using for the cold calling?
Yeah, so we use Dialpad right now, just because we can click to call, so we can take a spreadsheet or REI or whatever we want to use, and basically just go through and click each number. We can call it from there, and then we can text them as well straight from there. Because it's like we're actually hand doing it, we don't do enough volume to get marked as spam or anything like that. Because that was a big issue we had with the mass stuff. Stuff was constantly getting marked as spam, and then I think I had it's called caller ID reputation. I could monitor it and register my numbers with the carriers and everything, and they were still getting marked as spam. I had to like install an auto clicker on text blasting to regulate how many texts were being sent out. So it'd be like one text gets sent out, and then it waits 15 seconds and sends another text, and make new templates for text blasting.
Doing it manually with call tools now, you don't have those problems.
Yeah, so we use Dialpad now, but
I'm sorry, yeah, Dialpad.
Yeah, we use Dialpad now, but yeah, we don't have any of those problems with getting blocked or anything, because we don't do enough volume. I think it's like 150 calls a day or something per number is where the like baseline is for carriers to start to notice you. And so I'd have to pull up my spreadsheet. I can't tell you exactly how many we do off the top of my head with per number, but it's less than 150. So it's not, we're not having any trouble with that.
So
but yeah, we're using.
When those prospects become a lead, how are you getting them into Forefront? Like, what is that transition?
Yeah. So right now it's just they send over the information to Kimberly and she inputs it. It's been on my to-do list for like 2.5 weeks to build out a web form, but I still haven't got that done. And so I'm going to build out a web form where they can just put in the information there, and then it automatically gets uploaded into Forefront. But
there could be an integration too that you can do through Zapier. You might be able to have some way to have Dialpad send whatever information it has into a webhook on Forefront.
Yeah, I might be able to do that. The only caveat there is that there's not much information really actually within Dialpad. Usually the information we're calling from is out of REI-SIF, so I might be able to do something from REI-SIF into Forefront. But I know REI-SIF does not have the option to use them as a trigger in Zapier. They're only a result or whatever it ends up being called in Zapier, so they can't trigger anything. They can only have actions that happen in REI-SIF. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, so they only work with Zapier on the back end of it as being an action. But So yeah, right now, they just send the information over to Kimberly, and she uploads them into Forefront, and then calls the lead to get some more information, and either set an appointment or put them where they need to go. And I need to build out a web form. I just haven't done it yet. But yeah, so we're mainly focusing on that very niche outbound prospecting right now. We've got some PPC ads running and everything like that. We're building up SEO continuously. And I'm about to start some more direct mail again. I've been getting pretty deep into the Dan Kennedy stuff lately,
nice.
with direct marketing and stuff like that. So I'm about to start some direct mail again. Probably more niche direct mail for the time being, with like actual sales letters, and then may get back into kind of the mass postcard type stuff. But we'll see what kind of happens there. But I mean, right now it's probably closer to like 10 leads a month, but they're way better leads. So it's kind of that quantity versus quality type thing. We're converting more leads now than we were. Everything was kind of really slow at the beginning of the year, and we were getting leads. They were just not super motivated. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with marketing and stuff.
That's cool. Yeah, because you're nailing it, and you got to nail it before you scale it, right? So, you know, like you just said, the quality of those leads is good, and that's what you got to start with, you know, because it's a lot less work, right? All of that.
Yep.
It's less contacts, less communications, less appointments, less analysis, less everything, and you're doing more profitable deals, and you don't need a big, you know, overhead of a big organization to handle all of it. So it's always, dial in and then start growing it and looking at the numbers, making sure that it's not getting to the point where you're behind the power curve and it's taking more money to make more. You know, it's like the speed to drag ratio, kind of like on an airplane. Like they say, the drag is exponential to speed. You know, it doesn't, like the double. If you double the speed, it's not doubling the drag; it's actually quadrupling it. And so, growing the company in a way to where you don't experience that is always a smart thing to do.
Yeah, we kind of, when I transitioned out of the partnership with my boss, whatever, and started back on my own, I thought, well, I kind of know what I need to do. I'll just come in here. I've made some pretty good money this year. I'm just going to pump money into the business and build it right back up to where it was, and we'll be good to go. So I started pumping money into the business and everything, and lots of money was getting sent out, but there was no infrastructure built to handle that type of stuff. And so it did not work. So you can't just put out tons of different marketing and mass just pump money into the stuff and expect your business to be able to handle that, in a sense, I guess. And so that's one lesson I learned the hard way. And then after a couple months of spending a whole bunch of money, and it got to the point I was like, okay, I don't have any money coming in. I got to reevaluate something here. And so then I kind of pulled back on some of the marketing spend and really focused more on trying to build in that infrastructure. And then kind of that's when I really started training Kimberly on kind of, hey, lead intake, lead management, started really trying to hire for acquisitions and try to bring in more infrastructure to build it up, so that it wasn't basically, I was trying to go super fast, but there was nowhere to go because I didn't have the infrastructure built out at that point. So it's kind of the speed to drag type thing.
Yeah. Well, it's cool because you got an eye on it and you know what you need to do. And I'm super impressed again with what you've been able to do, and how you guys are growing in a smart way. So yeah, congrats to you. It's inspirational for a lot of people, I'm sure, that are going to hear this as soon as it gets released on the podcast. So thanks so much for joining us and sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your time, and look forward to, if I can help anybody out at any point or any way, feel free to reach out to me. You can I don't really use social media, but you can probably find me on Facebook, just Colin Spivey, or that's probably the best way to find me. So
Yeah. So, okay. So Facebook, you want to give out an email or just leave it to the Facebook stuff?
yeah, I can give out an email. It's Colin, just COLIN, just one L at ggihomebuyers.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Colin. Have a
Yeah,
great day
thank you,
and
Danny.
keep in touch.
Yeah,
All right.
for sure. All right.
All right.